Kia ora, good morning everyone, Richwon here, welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to have a look at this new TTArtisan 75mm f2 autofocus lens. If this lens looks familiar, yes, we have reviewed this lens on this channel just a few months ago. But this time, we are looking at it again because TTArtisan is now releasing a L-mount version of this lens. This is the first autofocus L-mount lens from TTArtisan, as I'm also a L-mount user, so of course I would like to have a look at this lens, as I think this is quite a special lens that is currently missing from the L-mount lens lineup. It is fast, very compact, and the price is also very attractive at only US $178. Before we start the usual disclaimers, I received this lens sample from TTArtisan. I do not have to return the sample after the review, but I also did not receive any money for this review. However, if you do want to purchase this lens after watching this review, I do have an affiliated link below, so you can use that to support my channel. Okay, this time let's start the review by looking at the image sharpness first. For this review, most of the testing were done using the 24 megapixel Lumix S5 II. At the maximum aperture f2, the center sharpness is already very decent. Stopping down the lens improved the center sharpness a little bit, but the improvement is quite minor as the lens is already very sharp at f2. We reached the maximum sharpness at f5.6. And now let's have a look at the corner sharpness. At f2, the corner sharpness is not bad at all, better than I expected. Stopping down the lens would gradually improve the corner sharpness. Focusing at the center or corner of the photo doesn't really affect the center or corner sharpness, which suggests the lens has very minimal field curvature. This lens minimum focus distance is 75 cm or approximately 30 inches. I have calculated the maximum magnification ratio and it is around 0.11 times. It is about the same as most other prime lenses of similar focal length. Image sharpness at minimum focus distance at f2 is slightly soft, but you can get sharper image if you stop down the lens even just to f2.8. With the 75mm focal length and f2 maximum aperture, you can dissolve background quite easily with this lens. Bokeh is pretty nice and smooth. I don't see any onion ring pattern. Bokeh balls remains pretty round even when we stop down the lens to around f5.6. There could be a bit of cat's eye bokeh near the corner, especially when you're shooting at f2 and the subject is at close distance. I myself quite like that effect and I think it adds a bit of character, but I also understand cat's eye bokeh is not for everyone. With vignetting correction enabled, there is a small amount of vignetting at wide open. It becomes better at f2.8. From f4 onwards, there is very minimal vignetting. When I compare this L-mount version with the E-mount version that I reviewed a few months ago, it seems there is a little bit more vignetting when I have the vignetting correction enabled. However, the L-mount version doesn't have that negative vignetting issue that I noticed on the E-mount version when I stopped down the lens. So it seems TTArtisan has made some changes to the lens profile, so while we do have a little bit more vignetting at wide open, we no longer have the over-correction issue the E-mount version has. If I disable vignetting correction, there is a little bit more vignetting, but I think the vignetting performance is still quite acceptable. For most of the photos, I don't really see much color fringing, even photos I shot at f2. This photo is the worst example I got from the a few hundred photos I shot with this lens. Most of my other photos have much better chromatic aberration performance than this photo. My local test photo result also looks pretty good. If you look at this brick wall photo, there is a tiny amount of pincushion distortion. But I think the amount is really minor, so I don't think anyone would complain about distortion when shooting with this lens. Lens flare performance is about average. When shooting into a very strong light source, I could see a bit of lens flare, and the contrast may also drop a little bit. I won't say the lens flare control is terrible, as there are many other lenses that has worse lens flare control than this TTArtisan. And also, this only happens when there is a really strong light source right in front of the camera. So unless you are taking photos or video like that, lens flare is usually not a serious problem at all. To get nice sunstars in your photos, you need to stop down the lens quite a bit. Even at f11, the sunstars still doesn't look very sharp. Only when I stop down to the minimum aperture f16, then the tails of the sunstars become sharp and long. I think I said something similar in my original TTArtisan 75mm f2 review, but I'm going to say it again. With the 75mm focal length and f2 maximum aperture, I was expecting this lens to be quite a bit bigger. So when I received the lens, I was quite surprised because this lens is just a lot smaller than I expected. I mean, look at the size of this lens. It is really quite small. It is a bit smaller than the Lumix f1.8 prime lens. The weight of this L mount sample is 331 grams. It may not sound very light, but this lens has a very solid full metal construction, so the lens actually feels very nice. This lens comes with a reversible lens hood that clicks onto the lens securely. There isn't any buttons or switches on the lens, but we have an aperture ring near the lens mount. 3 clicks per stop from wide open to the minimum aperture f16. There's also the A position on the aperture ring, so you can control the aperture from the camera instead if you prefer. The aperture ring feels nice. The lens has a metal lens mount. There isn't any USB port on the lens, as the rear lens cap can be used as a USB dock for firmware update instead. The front filter thread is 62mm. This is not a weatherproof lens, but I'm not really surprised because of the budget price. Since TTArtisan is not part of the official L-mount alliance, my biggest concern about this lens would be its autofocus performance, because I have previously tested the E-mount version, so I know the image quality and build quality of this lens are both pretty decent. Just like the E-mount version, this lens uses stepping motor for autofocus. The autofocus is quiet, but it's not silent. Autofocus speed is acceptable. It is a bit slower than this lens E-mount version. There seems to be some focus hunting that the E-mount version doesn't have. I'm guessing it's probably because this is the first L-mount autofocus lens from TTArtisan. When I told TTArtisan about the difference in the autofocus performance, they told me they are going to do some more optimization to improve the autofocus performance. But the time that when I record this review, I haven't received any update firmware yet. And if there is a new firmware update for this lens in the future, I will drop a comment below and let you know the result. But anyway, while the autofocus performance is not perfect, it is definitely good enough for normal portrait photos. Just don't expect super fast autofocus performance. Even when shooting video, the autofocus works very well, probably even better than the photo mode. Look at this example. I shot this using full area AF with human detection at f2. It was able to follow me quite smoothly and accurately, so no problem at all. However, the lens has quite a bit of focus breathing. This is very noticeable when I did my usual 1m to 20m focus breathing test. If you want to shoot in manual focus mode, the lens supports both linear and non-linear manual focus. For linear mode, it also respects the angle setting on the camera, and the manual focus ring rotation direction also matches that of my Lumix S lenses. So the manual focus experience is pretty much exactly the same as a first-party L-mount lens. When I did the original review of this lens for the Sony E-mount a few months ago, I really liked this lens compact size, solid build quality, and for only US $178, I think it is one of the best bargains in the market right now for anyone who wants a portrait lens or a fast short telephoto lens. I was really hoping this lens will be available for L-mount user one day, as a lens like this is something that the L-mount currently lacking. So I was really happy when TTArtisan told me that they are going to release this lens for L-mount. And now, after testing this lens but in L-mount version again, I would still say this is one of the best bargains in the market right now. Such a compact, solid lens with f2 maximum aperture for only $178 is just excellent value for money. My only real complaint is that currently the autofocus performance seems not exactly as good as the Sony version, so hopefully TTArtisan will release firmware update to improve the autofocus performance later on. Then this lens will be absolutely fantastic. But even if they don't do that, the current autofocus performance is still good enough for general use. This is one of the lenses that I will keep it in my camera bag instead of putting it back in the box and never touch it again after I finish the review.